Hey, how's it going? Samson Folk here with the Raptors Weekly Podcast. A very, very special episode in that every time the fan base wonders how much money is available, what trades might be made, who should they be signing in the offseason, myself and Blake Murphy get together for either the free agency extravaganza or the trade deadline extravaganza. And that's what we're doing here today. We'll be talking about all of that after we talk about some of the on-court stuff that's been going on lately. But yeah, that's who's here. Blake Murphy of Sportsnet, of The Morning Show, co-hosting over there, and just watching a lot of basketball, watching a lot of sports these days, and chopping it up every morning, Monday to Friday. How's it going, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I had a hell of a time watching that game last night. I guess your cliff notes of that, the Raptors Heat game, any thoughts?
Yeah, it was, speaking just personally, like it was a night where in this new job, nights like that can be a little weird because like I'm on Leaf duty as well as Raptor duty. And those two teams were playing at the same time. And it was also the night of the Royal Rumble, which I'm pretty out on WWE wrestling these days, but it's still like the most fun event of the year to like bet on or watch casually. So all those things were going on at once, but the timing actually worked out really perfectly where, you know, the Leafs are obviously always second screen for me to the Raptors. But the way that the intermissions and halftime lined up was really nice. And then that Raptors game ended right as the Royal Rumble, like the main event started. So that was all perfect. But man, I was like, my main thing was like, I was exhausted for those guys, like 5 guys playing 54 minutes or more. It's one of those things where like, had it been any other season, it would be like a kind of a fun wink curiosity or whatever. It's like, oh, remember that game? Like let's fire up an old box score a couple years from now. But instead it's like, oh no, this is so emblematic of everything that's happened this season. It was really cool to get that win though. Like I think I don't want to ascribe too much value to a single game, but I think, you know, for those 5 players who are the core and who are probably going to play a lot of basketball together over the next couple of years, to pull out a game like that with little reinforcement, with, you know, those guys not at 100%, not everyone playing their very best game, a very good Heat team that even without Kyle Lowry has been, you know, they've been really, really good, a monster Jimmy Butler game on the other side, all that stuff. And you managed to grind it out and you managed to pull it out. And I think, you know, that could be a big confidence building win. I'm not sure the same would be said for the bench, who just like didn't play at all. They got 37 of the 315 minutes available. But for those 5 guys, like I think that could be a galvanizing game. I think that can be, you know, we talk about that group's got to build chemistry. That group's got to find minutes together. You're not going to find 54 or 56 better minutes than that to kind of get these guys to gel. And the last few minutes of the fourth quarter, plus the 15 minutes across the 3 OTs, I don't think we've seen the Raptors defense at that high a level yet this year. You know, the Heat score 20 points over the 3 overtime periods, which is nice. But also just you look at some of the individual defensive performances. I'm kind of rambling all over the place here. That's the kind of game it was. There were so many things that kind of popped up as a story and then went away over the course of the game. But man, the big takeaway, I think, other than the minutes total, is just how good Pascal and OG especially, but the defense as a whole looked, even as that game got into the, oh my God, everyone's so exhausted territory.
Okay, so I'll dig in there first. Pascal Siakam, I think, played the best regular season defensive game I've seen over the past however many years from the Raptors. And that obviously a lot of people are going to remember the back-to-back, the stuff on Jimmy, and then the double stuff on Jimmy. But prior to that play, he stuffed Bam at the rim in transition, being the only guy back. And then the other play that sticks out to me was the one on Gabe Vincent, where Gabe Vincent turns the corner. Pascal's the only guy back. He stunts to take away the pass to the corner and then blocks him at the rim. And then quite a few, I think 4 or 5 defensive possessions where he either hedged the pick and roll late, blew it up, then scrammed back into his own assignment, or just straight up switched onto Jimmy Butler and stonewalled him, a guy who would just completely unlock the Raptors and got to anywhere he wanted. And he closed out defensive possessions as a rebounder. the totality of what he did, I can't think of a comp or a comparable situation as far as performances the last however many years.
Yeah, it was a monster, man. Like I know you can't judge defense from the box score, but you could try sometimes. And he had 4 steals and 4 blocks and 13 rebounds and was a +8 in a 4-point game that he played 56, 57 minutes in. You can look at it that way. You can look at it highlight wise. You can look at, hey, here's another way to look at the job that Pascal and to a lesser extent OG were doing on Jimmy Butler. The offense ran through Tyler Hero for overtime. That's not like, that wasn't a mistake, or wasn't like Tyler Hero just like going into business for himself. That was in large part Jimmy Butler couldn't get anything going, and you see the play where he ISOs OG and gets the shot off just after the buzzer goes to end the clock. And I think Tyler Hero took half of their shots in overtime and was not having a good game as it is. And Jimmy Butler, I think, took 4 field goal attempts across the overtime period. So, I think that's the kind of stuff that you can look at how a defensive player is impacting a game. And it's, what is the guy that they're tasked with guarding doing in response to that? So I just brought it up. Yeah, Jimmy's usage dropped to 18% in overtime. And Miami's offense ran through Tyler Hero at 38% and Gabe Vincent at 22%. And if you're the Raptors and you're drawing up, you'd probably trade a couple of those Hero shots for PJ Tucker shots, but you held Jimmy to below average usage. You turned him into more of a point guard, and Bam was like a non-factor offensively. So I think the Raptors defensive rating in overtime was 76.9.
Even better than the Boston series, that lineup that had like, what was it, like an 82? It is between 82 and 87 defensive rating, the small ball or uber small ball.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that too is on the other side of the court, the Raptors kind of toggling between what the hell are we going to run to get a bucket? And they went through everything. They had, OG in low post, OG at the 45 extended. They had some Fred VanVleet pick and roll possessions. They had Gary Trent Jr. pick and roll possessions. They had Pascal isolations and Pascal pick and roll possessions. As far as shot quality, I thought their best looks came from Pascal's possessions. You get the layup, you get the wide open look for Gary Trent Jr., you get one of Fred's threes. But more than anything, and shout out to Fred, but they scored on broken plays almost exclusively. What did you think of the late game offense?
Yeah, well, here's the thing, right? We just talked about how good the defense was in overtime. If your offense was functional at all, it wouldn't have taken 3 overtimes. So I changed the range filters, by the way. So the last 20 minutes of the game, 5-minute mark of the fourth quarter through to the end of the final overtime, 20 minutes. And the Raptors made no subs in that time, obviously. An 80 defensive rating. Awesome. Let's celebrate. Let's bring it home. 88.2 offensive rating. So not great there for sure. Siakam still has a little bit of for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the yips or just like the finishing isn't all the way there in these situations. And he tends to come up short a little bit on those floater range shots. And Fred was ice cold all game until that clutch spot. And then, 61% true shooting down the stretch there. Yeah, I mean, Scotty had some garbage buckets. The late game offense is just, it is what it is at this point. And I don't want to be like reductive about it, but we know what this half court offense looks like. And we know what it looks like when another defense dials in against them. And the Heat are really good defensively. Like they have Jimmy, PJ, Bam, and Gabe Vincent all on the court for that closeout period. And they're doing offense defense switches when the situation allows. Not a ton, but there was the odd window to do it. So yeah, it's not a great situation for the Raptors offense. So I've tended to think that in general, their late game offense has looked best with the ball in Pascal Siakam's hands as basically the point guard. That frees Fred to be off the ball a little bit, with either as a kind of scramble around and pop out for a shot, or even as a screener, which we saw there was one play last night where Fred did a little it was like a horizontal screen, the screener almost, and it ended up he pushed his guy into a double and then he flared open off of it. I just think there's more dynamism to what this offense can do if Siakam's handling and Fred's off ball and working around that, because he is their best shooter, and OG and Gary Trent space the floor. But like on a night like last night where those guys were pretty cold down the stretch, you need Fred's 3-point shooting. So that's where I'm at. It's nothing unique to that game. I've thought for a while now this team's looked at its best in the half court with Siakam as kind of the point guard and VanVleet as more of the shooting guard. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. Especially Pascal he's getting downhill is such an important facet of half court offense, because Fred has actually done, honestly, a tremendous job of pushing the ball in transition, way better than any other year. His rim finishing numbers wouldn't be as improved as people think if you took away the transition possessions. He's just done a great job of applying pressure that way. But yeah, Pascal being able to get downhill, make reads from the middle of the floor in a patient and composed type of way, that's just something Fred can't really do. And that doesn't mean like he's been better than Fred overall or anything like that. It's just Pascal has gotten so good at segmenting his drives. He doesn't need to take a straight line because teams load up, and that's usually not available to him. The help side defense would be too overwhelming. So he slows down his drive into parts where he can kind of oscillate between backing down, facing up, all that different kind of stuff. And he's done a really great job of negotiating defenses in that way. And he is a little bit hurried up in, as the game goes on and as it gets closer down the stretch. But the shots, you hope they start dropping in after touching every part of the rim. But I guess we'll see as it goes on. The minutes, though, on your Twitter. So you have Gary Trent Jr., a little graphic here. Gary Trent at 56. It's the 20 highest minute games in Raptors history. So out of those 25 come from last night. Gary at 56, Scotty, Pascal, and OG also at 56, Fred at 54. Pretty wild. And so Fred dealing with knee stuff, Scotty dealing with hand stuff, Gary coming back from an ankle, Pascal, OG, Pascal, and OG. But these guys are playing heavy minutes. It would be a shame if I didn't ask you what you think of the amount of minutes they've been playing lately.
First of all, you can't say hand stuff for Scotty Barnes. It's going to bring people's minds elsewhere. It's going to remind people of the Sunny hand stuff. What are we in junior high? Yeah. So the other thing here too, on top of just the total minutes load, they played the last 23 minutes and 44 seconds of the game without a sub, which is bonkers. I think there's also we have to be pretty amazed that they didn't get in foul trouble at all. There's a lot to unpack there. And like you said, I posted that graphic last night, and you know me, there's nothing I like more than finding random Raptors historical stat oddities. And first of all, to realize that Vince Carter played all 63 minutes of a triple overtime game once is crazy. But yeah, this is like, they said it on the broadcast too. It's the first time in NBA history, I believe, that 5 players on the same team played 50 or more minutes, and it wasn't 50 or more, it was 54 and a half or more. So yeah, I think, look, it's a problem, and Nick Nurse has been pushed on it a little bit. And at the start of last week, he said basically, yeah, well, we need to go to a 9 or 10 man rotation soon because we have a really condensed schedule coming up. And you can look at that. What did they had a Tuesday, Wednesday back to back. And so that was the Bulls game was the second half of that. And even without Fred, they basically played 7 guys, and then Malachi and Utah kind of split an 8th man role. And then last night, it's basically, I mean, they played 8 guys, but again, they played 5 guys, 54 more minutes in a 63 minute game. So you look ahead now, and yeah, sure, they have today off. That's great. They also play a Monday, Tuesday back-to-back, have one day off, and then play a Thursday, Friday back-to-back. So how I've always felt about the minutes is it's okay in small windows. Like, you can have a game like that. You can have, you get into even if it's not the Heat game, pick your game where those guys have played big minutes, and you get down and there's 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and the game's close, and you don't want to give Fred or Pascal the extra 2 minutes they're supposed to get before they sub back in because the game's in the balance and you want to win that. Like, all of those micro decisions are justifiable because there are winnable games and you're trying to, you're a 500-ish team. You don't have the benefit of playing it cautious. And if you lose, you lose. Where it becomes an issue is when your guys are setting modern day records where, Fred had 8 straight games of 39 plus minutes before his knee thing. And it was the first time in a couple years anyone in the league had done that. And at the exact same time, Pascal was on a 7-game streak. And those were the only 2 guys that had in the entire league this year who had done that. And then Fred's first game back, it's 54 minutes. So I do think there's risk here in a couple of ways. There's obviously risk for cumulative load. You don't want to get into a spot where these guys are really banged up or, one day off in a 4-game and 5 night isn't enough to get them right. And then there's also the case of, hey, you can't go 10 games without using your bench, right? And we saw across the Portland, Charlotte, and Chicago games, oh, look, Delano Banton can still give you some minutes. And Precious and Chris Boucher aren't going anywhere. They're going to stay in the rotation. But Malachi Flynn and Utah have occasionally looked okay. Delano's looked mostly good. And I don't know that it's good for anything, really, for those guys to be sitting down for a long time. And I mean that, you could talk about it developmentally. You could talk about it chemistry-wise. You could talk about it just like, hey, what if Fred has to sit one of these games where it's 4 games in 5 nights because they're trying to manage around that knee? And then, Delano Banton and Malachi Flynn both haven't played in a couple days and the team's not practicing right now because the schedule is so condensed. Like, there are costs to all this stuff, short-term and longer term. So again, night to night, yes, you tell me they're going to triple overtime with the Heat before the season and you say, hey, all these guys are going to play 50 plus minutes because that's what it took to win the game. I'm going to say, absolutely. You do that, and then they all get the next day off in Miami to recover. You add the context that Fred VanVleet is just coming back from a knee thing, Scotty's banged up, and most of these guys, 4 of the 5 of them are in the top 12 in the league in minutes played, and 2 of them have played like the most minutes in the league over the last couple of weeks. Then I probably say, no, well, you can't do that. So I'm very, very curious what the minutes are like over this 4-game and 5-day stretch coming up, because this is getting at least a little worrisome with the Fred knee element and the not trusting the depth element here.
Pistons, Blazers with no Dame, 2 losses that for me, and I could be sitting in an armchair and thinking too psychologically here, and physiologically maybe, but it's hard not to think that they come out flat against those teams because they want that game to be kind of like, okay, we'll take it a little bit easier. Do you know what I mean? Or do you think I'm digging in too deep? Like, because they came out flat.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. Like, this is what we mean when we say playing down to the competition or a trap game or something like that, right? It's that night on the schedule looks like, oh yeah, 85% of our best effort should be able to beat a Pistons team that has 7 wins this year that haven't come against the Toronto Raptors. So that's the kind of stuff you're looking at. And like, look, they lost Ken Burch in the Pistons game, sure, but they also like ran a 6-man rotation basically after he got hurt and couldn't beat the Pistons. And at a certain point in that game, you got to, I think, like, it wasn't close late and the Pistons pulled away. The Pistons blew them out. I think at a certain point in a game like that, you have to either try the bench as a, hey, we need a spark. We need to try something different. We need some energy, or as a, look, something's off tonight and we've just got to live to fight another day. The Portland game's, I guess, a little bit different because they started to make that like fake comeback late, and they'd come back from 34 to make it a closer game late before Portland pulled back away. But even that one, I think there's a lesson in, like, a big part of that comeback was Delano Banton giving you energy and freshness and good minutes off the bench. So I don't know, man, like 4 games in 5 nights here with the workload that these guys have been under. Would you expect like a night off for some of these guys this week?
I probably would, but considering it's Hawks, Heat, Bulls, Hawks, like, I don't know, man.
They're real games.
I guess like Hawks, maybe,
but especially if won like 1 million games in a row.
Well, see, what I'm thinking is like maybe one of the Hawks games, because maybe you let Fred play the first Hawks game, see how he does as Trey's primary, and then you kind of gauge, okay, can we put Gary on Trey in game 2 or something like that? Because
let me spoil that one for you. You cannot.
Well, you know what I mean, though, right? Or maybe they get like really, really adventurous with switching against Trey, or maybe they kind of test out some pick and roll because that's the Hawks. They run a lot of pick and roll. You have Trey Young, you run pick and roll. Maybe they try out some different looks and see how he responds, and then you know, I don't know how they would approach it, but I don't know if there's a rest game in there. The Hornets game went really well without him, but that was a lot of that was 3-point variance and just Pascal being super, super sharp. So. Like
and the Hornets having one of those flat nights.
Yeah. I actually know when the Raptors win, it's always against the best version of the other team. Don't be silly.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
LaMelo had multiple triple doubles that game. Miles Bridges was everything that was promised. All that stuff. PJ Washington didn't get thrown out after 4 minutes.
They won that exchange. Justin Champagny was like, hell yeah, I'm taking PJ out.
But also though, like Justin Champagny's been benched since then. What happened? He was like the 6th man for a little bit, and then he gets tossed from there. And has he even played since then?
I'll tell you what happened. The Raptors got really high and mighty because they had a really low offensive rebounding game against the Hornets. And then they're like, oh, yeah, we don't even need to worry about that anymore. And then, you know, the Bulls game and the Heat game, maybe he'll be back in the lineup again. This actually introduced.
You're playing 4 games at 5 nights. You're going to need more than 6, 7 guys.
We're gonna need 6 offensive rebounds in 7 minutes from you, Mr. Champagny. The thing I want to talk about quick though is we'll do Gary and OG, and then we'll talk all-star stuff for Pascal and Fred, and then cap stuff. But okay, so the thing is, the Bulls game I thought was OG's best game as an offensive fulcrum this year. And not because it wasn't reliant on mid-range shot making. It wasn't like that game against the Knicks where a lot of it was, you know, kind of popping off the dribble. As we've seen, that's not a super reliable aspect of his game. But he was a post hub. They did lose to the Bulls. But in that game, I thought that OG was able to break down the defense by doing the early work in possessions. He made a lot of great reads against doubles, against blitzes, and he hit shots. What have you thought about the experiment of initiating through OG in the post?
I think it's more fruitful than initiating through OG face up right now. You mentioned you're not as reliant on the mid-range stuff in a setup like that, which I think is, with where skill set is now, you just don't really like. I find a little bit when he faces up, it's everything gets a little stagnant, and I don't think that that's necessarily his fault. I think they're learning how to play around him too. But he's also shooting 29% on those long twos. So it's probably time to, at least for a little bit, pocket those. What he's doing a great job of when he's initiating through the post is, first of all, he can bully his way to the rim. He's shooting over 70% at the rim, and he takes a quarter of his field goal attempts there overall. So that's strong. I feel like he's a better passer from that position, which isn't all that surprising because even early in his career, when he made some like, hey, this guy could be a playmaker kind of reads, a lot of the time it was like, oh, he got an offensive rebound and found someone, or he cut baseline and then made an extra read. So him being able to see that stuff unfold with his back to the basket and some movement around him is not all that surprising to me. So I like it. I don't know that I want to run a ton of that when everyone's healthy and everyone's there, just because there are a lot of mouths to feed when everyone's healthy. But I do think that, look, OG, when everyone's there, especially when Fred and Pascal are both on the floor, statistically, he's doing more spotting up. He's doing more, hey man, stand in the corner and you'll get assisted 3-point attempts. And with this 3-point percentage dipping this year, those haven't been as high yield as usual. Now, I don't think OG is going to be a 25% usage guy when Fred and Pascal are healthy, but this is maybe a nice in between where you give him the odd post possession. You know that he can make good reads out of it. Teams probably aren't sending, we saw the Bulls double Pascal and like shade the paint with extra bodies beyond that. in that game, and they didn't do the same to OG. So there's an opportunity to get 2 feet in the paint without a ton of extra help. Yeah, and I think it's just like it's a good thing to keep in the mix, and I think also there's some versatility there in terms of you can run stuff for Scotty in similar ways, and then the roles of Gary, OG, and Pascal, or sorry, Gary, Fred, and Pascal around that don't change that much. So you can kind of have the same package for both of them as you figure out what the right mix is and what the right volume is for each of them in their spots. So I like that better than face up OG. I'm not out on that as something he can work on over time. It's just, the results aren't there like they were there the first couple games of the season. So using him a different way makes a lot of sense to me.
I also just kind of like the Tim Hardaway Jr. has been a better playoff teammate for Luka than Kristaps Porzingis has. And it's because Tim Hardaway Jr. was doing an incredible amount of terrible work in New York. And like the fruits of that labor shows up in a playoff context when you have to go to counters and stuff. Why not let, especially like you look at the Bucks game where, and overall, like if you can find a little chart that says Pascal Siakam is being doubled on over 30% of possessions and Fred is around 28%. That's a lot of defensive attention for Pascal. That's only behind Luka, Shea, Joel Embiid, Ja Morant, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. And Fred is behind like 4 or 5 more players, including KD and DeMar DeRozan. That's a lot of defensive attention. And to have like the ability to just kind of toss it into OG for, an empty side post up that might be beneficial for the team, or an empty side pick and roll, depending who the partner is. That's helpful. And especially, we'll see what happens with Gary as things go on, but that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about. Now, the Gary thing of it all. So there's kind of a question that's been sitting in my brain that I always want to answer no to, but Gary keeps on responding with, now 3 straight 30-point games. Is Gary Trent Jr. one of the most talented shooters in the league, or is he still riding some sort of incredible wave of shot making? Because I know it sounds like, well, he can't be one of the best shot makers in the league. He's only shooting 42.5% from the floor, maybe like 37, 38% from 3. But his shot diet is one of the most difficult of any shooter out there right now. And to even be at 42.5% is like a hell of an accomplishment. I think a lot of people with his shot diet would be around 36, 37, perhaps even worse. So I'm curious what you've made of his season offensively, because he's been a streaky shooter in the past, and now he's just been on a level.
What is it Kyle used to say about DeMar all the time? He is a bad shot maker. That was Kyle's favorite way of describing DeMar. And I think Gary Trent Jr. is getting there a little bit, right? I don't have, we can, with things like second spectrum and stuff, we can see, what's the expected field goal percentage on this shot off of this many dribbles in this location with a defender this close, and compare that to what Gary Trent Jr. actually did. I don't have access to that stuff, but here's what we could tell you. He is carrying pretty sizable usage. He's above the 90th percentile in long mid-range looks per cleaning the glass, and he's at an 82nd percentile in hitting them. So the volume efficiency trade-off is real, even on long mid-range shots, even though those are the purview of star players usually. To be shooting 46% on long mid-range shots that you're taking more than 20% of the time it's just like, for a team that doesn't have a ton of spacing and a ton of natural rim pressure, it stands out as a really important skill, because you have to be able to operate in that little bit of mid-range, because that's what defenses are giving you, and you're not elite at the other things. Now, the counter to that would be that Trent's field goal percentage is very low overall, in part because he doesn't get to the rim and doesn't shoot very well when he gets there. So there's a lot that goes into that. But I think you look at, hey, we've got what do we got? We've got 1,000 3-point attempt sample now that says Gary Trent is a 39% 3-point shooter. And not all of those are assisted. Some of those are self-created. 81.5% have been assisted in his career. So, about 20% of his threes are self-created. And then more than half of his twos and almost 2/3 of his twos this year have been self-created. And again, 45.9% on the longer, the 16 feet and out, 48.5% in that kind of 10 to 16 foot range. And then even 43% in that like floater range when he doesn't get all the way to the rim, but pulls up short. So those are good numbers, and they fit where the Raptors offense is well, because again, they don't have knockdown 3-point shooting and they don't have a ton of natural rim pressure. So what's left on the court to score from? I do, you can question how this not scales. I don't want to use the tech term of like, how does this scale? Because I don't think there's a scenario in which Gary Trent is like a 25% usage guy anyway. But I do think there's a question about how does this skill set fit in a better offense, which is a weird thing, right? Because if the offense is better, he's probably getting more assisted catch and shoot threes. So his overall numbers probably look better, but he probably has far fewer opportunities to do the things he's been doing this year. All of that is to say, compare it to guys around the league in terms of mid-range volume and mid-range effectiveness. He's not the best, but he is he's one of the top bad shot makers going, that's for sure.
Strange statistical thing on the Raptors. OG Anunoby's true shooting percentage, 0.544. Gary's 0.545. Pascal's 0.546. Kem's 0.547. An oddity, to be sure. But yeah, so like the thing with Gary is he's just not getting to the rim. I think, what is it? Over 100 possessions or 100 used shooting possessions, he might get to the rim on what? Like 7? I don't know, like 7 out of 100. It's just not happening very often, and the free throw attempts are not there either. But the point you make about it standing out as more of a necessity and kind of it's larger as you see it in the Raptors offense is a salient one. It's a very interesting, because, it's always like symbiotic, of course, the way that players and teams coexist. And, he's in a very, very interesting spot. Before we get into the all-star stuff for Pascal and Fred, though, a quick message from our pals over at Jack Health. Want to get to the top of your game? Jack Health at www.jack.health is an online service for men's health that handles the doctor's appointment, getting the prescription, and shipping, which, by the way, is free. All you need to do is stay at home and relax. Sexual health, daily health, hair and skin, it's easy to book an appointment with any of their certified doctors. You don't need to tell everyone and their mother your issues like when you go to the clinic and mumble what you're there for. Do it all from the privacy of your own home through www.jack.health and boost your game to the best it can be. And Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, all-star game, all-star thoughts. Let's start with Fred, the guy who hits all the big shots. Never not.
Oh, yeah. Are you asking me if I think he's going to make it?
Just kind of your thoughts on if he will, what's the case, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I think he has a case. I think the Raptors are only a game over 500. So that's going to be tough. A lot of coaches have said, well, I take the standings and I go down that way. And the Raptors are pretty far down the standings. By the time you get to 8th in the East, your ballot might be full, right? So let's play it out. You look at Miami, Jimmy Butler's probably going to get some love there. I don't think Tyler Hero's there yet. He's going to get 6th man of the year. He doesn't need to worry about all-star. But Jimmy's going to get some love. You go to Chicago, Zach LaVine's probably as close to a lock as there is. Philly, probably no one. Cleveland, there's going to be real Darius Garland love. Milwaukee, you probably get some Drew Holiday veteran nod. And then, Chris Middleton's he could land on the guard or front court spot. I don't think he's an all-star this year, but he might get some of the, hey, these are the defending champs and we respect them a lot nod. There's James Harden on Brooklyn. You get to LaMelo Ball on Charlotte. So you have all those potential guards on the ballot before you get to the Toronto-Boston mishmash, which has Fred and Jalen, and then at the other position, Tatum and Siakam. So it's going to be tough. I did think Trey and DeMar getting in was the best case for Fred. But I think it's probably coming down to him, Drew, and Garland for 1 or 2 spots. I think, obviously we watch Fred a lot more, right? We know just how important he's been to this team. Hitting 39% on 10 threes a game and a difficult diet of threes is monstrous. Career high in assists and rebounds and close to the top of the league in steals and deflections and a very good defender, all that good stuff. And even just if you're just going counting stats wise, 22, 5, and 7 is historically, those are all-star numbers. So I think he should be in. I really don't know. I honestly, this is an answer I feel really badly about because it turns two positives into a negative. I think him and Siakam are going to split we got to give the Raptors a nod vote between the coaches because they both have compelling back of the roster all-star cases. And if the coaches go like, if every coach decides Garland's the guy they want to award on Cleveland, so he gets 14 votes, and 7 decide it's VanVleet and 7 decide it's Siakam from the Raptor side, then Garland's getting in, right? So it's a bit of a weird spot to have 2 candidates internally for what's probably only one spot.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's the interesting part of it is that Pascal is the guy who has all-star. He's been an all-star. He started the game. If he was the standout player on the Raptors, the media and the coaches would probably be more comfortable just saying, oh, yeah, he's back to it. That's an all-star. We've seen this before. But Fred is trying to kind of, shake loose of this analytics darling mold. And just in optics, not in reality. He's still an analytics darling, of course, but trying to be more accessible for people who are just looking at the game through well, I don't watch every game and I don't look at the peripheral statistics and I'm just seeing this now. And it's harder to see it because he's this small diminutive guard. And while 22, 5, and 7 is certainly good, it doesn't pop as much as some other numbers that are being put up in all-star respect. So it's really interesting. Pascal now. Pascal is starting from way behind because of missing those games. But his last month of basketball, I think, has been roughly 23, 9, and 7. And now this is maybe a fringe belief, but I believe he's been a better defender than Fred in that pocket of time, but certainly not close prior to that. And so I'm curious what you think of his all-star status.
He's an interesting case because, again, he missed the first chunk of the season. He missed the first 10 games, and then his first 5 games, and he had another game off in there, were pretty shaky. He had that one really good game against Detroit, but otherwise they were pretty iffy. And sometimes what happens with stuff like this, at least more on the media vote side, is the narrative gets locked in, right? Oh, this is the story. Siakam's still struggling a little bit, and he's, first it was the bubble and then the COVID and now the shoulder. And then you look, and let's take away those 5 games to start the year, which is his first 5 games. He had no preseason, he had no offseason. I think we can do him that favor. He has averaged 22.1 points, 8.7 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 1.3 steals on 48, 34, 73 shooting. That's 29 games. He's averaged almost 40 minutes a game over that time, almost a +5 per game. And yeah, he's gone from, I would say, the first half of that sample, he was the number 2, and Fred was kind of still the guy, and Pascal was doing an admirable job finding, hey, Scotty was cooking while I was gone. OG used more possessions. Fred's kind of been the guy. Where do I fit in? And I thought he did an awesome job, spiked the rebounding. The defense got back to a level from him we haven't seen since 2018, 2019, I don't think. And then, as Fred has not even cooled off, but just ceded some of that responsibility, Siakam's last, 15 games maybe are you talk about what the best version of him would look like in terms of point forward Siakam. So let's go since he got back from COVID, which is 17 games, almost 7 assists per game, over a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, averaging almost a double-double at 23 and 9.2. And then those shooting splits have gone up to 48, 38, 73. So as his usage has gone up and as his playmaking responsibilities gone up over the course of the season, he's gotten even better. And I would argue the defense has gotten better too. So Siakam is actually in a weird spot where I don't think Fred's going to have much of a chance at getting all NBA at the end of the season. Siakam might legitimately have a chance to be one of those rare didn't make the All-Star team, got a lot, if not all NBA third team, got a bunch of votes at the end of the season. I just think that the 13 missed games and those 5 where he was shaky and the narrative was very unfair to him, at least locally, that probably hurts the chances here in addition to the vote splitting.
Yeah. Well, the point you make about all NBA is a really interesting one, especially with Paul George, Kawhi, Randall, guys like that falling out of the race because of a regression to a former version of themselves, struggles, injuries, whatever. And even Tatum, right? Like Tatum has like huge box score numbers, but his efficiency is dipped, and so is the defense per a lot of the people who pay attention to defense. So it'll be really interesting to see the case for Pascal. It's like, if he keeps this up, right? If Pascal gives you 22, 9, and 7, that's kind of nutty. That's absurd. And especially at those splits and that defense, it would be really interesting to see. I probably would still, if there's a guy to be rewarded for All-Star, I would probably put my chips in on Fred. I mean, the body of work over the course of the season has been immense. The team, basically, he plays the minutes, they win the minutes. He doesn't play the minutes, they lose the minutes. He has all the peripheral statistics, all the catch-alls, and then just the traditional box score stuff recognizes him as such. I think it'd be pretty sad if he didn't get to make it, because he's really, really earned it. And maybe he would actually play in the 3-point competition if he was also an All-Star, because apparently that's what held him back last time. Is Fred your guy? Probably.
I think so. Wait, are you saying he didn't make it because he wasn't going to do the All-Star game or the 3-point competition?
Yeah, he got invited and he said he didn't want to do the All-Star, and he didn't want to go to the 3-point competition because he wasn't an All-Star. He hasn't gone because he says he doesn't want to go unless he's an All-Star.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, man. Wouldn't you rather have the time off?
I mean, I'm not like a professional basketball player, and I've never been to an All-Star weekend.
No,
so
you're
like,
a professional dancer, are you not?
Yes.
Understanding that correctly?
Yes, exactly. So I would probably, using my small brain right now, say like, yeah, I'd go to the All-Star game regardless, because what am I? I'm like Austin Reeves, except significantly worse at basketball and much shorter. I'll go to the All-Star game, sure.
But I've been to one. I've been to the one that was in Toronto, and it was a lot of fun. I don't know that like Cleveland still in a partial, I think in the US you would say partial pandemic, I guess, whereas here in Toronto we're still fully pandemic. I don't know that would be the choice for me. I think I might just try to hit a beach if I don't get invited to the team outright.
Do you have a beach in mind?
Well, I'm assuming in this case I have the money and access to private flights that they have, in which case, I don't know. I don't know enough beaches, but I know that that's what they always do. They just disappear. And then you see one Instagram photo once they're back of just like the sand or something like that.
Oh, to disappear and then emerge covered in sand. Anyway, the cap thing. Let's get into that. We're approaching the trade deadline, and a very interesting one for the Raptors. You and I have just been talking glowingly about Gary, about OG, about Pascal, about Fred. There hasn't been much Scotty, but obviously you and I both really enjoy Scotty. We've both talked about him glowingly. He's batting an extremely high percentage as far as rookies go offensively. The defense is coming around, and it's really nice to see that core, or quote unquote core, is doing things. And we also talked about the bench minutes. So that puts us in a position now where we have to look at this team and say, is there help on the way? Should there be? Won't there be? We'll get into the cap part of it, but what do you want them to do at the trade deadline if they can?
The spot I'm at with the Raptors at the trade deadline is that I think you have to be realistic about your paths to adding to this core, and through that, recognize that there's never a bad time to add talent. And what I mean by that is, last year was their cap space year. They decided to use that cap space to facilitate the Lowry trade and pick up Precious Achiuwa as a prospect. That's okay. That's your choice. If Precious ends up being a guy, maybe that looks a certain way. And a lot of the guys that they could have gotten the cap space for, which also would have required, releasing some guys before the guarantee dates and stuff. They were guys in kind of the Gary Trent tier, both salary wise and, is this guy a flyer? Can we develop him kind of wise? So the opportunity cost there was what it was. They opted for Precious. The result of that and some of the contracts they've given out since is that they're not going to be a cap space team this coming summer. Realistically, as long as Pascal, Fred, and OG are on the team on these contracts, they're probably not going to be a cap space team, because even if Gary Trent leaves, Scotty Barnes will eventually need a raise, and some of the other guys will. So I don't think, and Pascal and Fred are like 28 years old. I don't think you're waiting for another big cap space year, another big swing for a free agent year, because that hasn't borne fruit for you, and it's too slow a play. So I look at this team as currently constructed. All the core pieces are here at least for next year, probably even longer if you want them to be, because even if Trent opts out, you have his bird rights, and you have certainly the inside track on re-signing him at that time. So what you're looking for right now is, if you decide as the Raptors that this is your core and you think that you can win with this core, either, by adding around the margins, hitting on another picks, developing Scotty, or by doing what they did for the 2019 title, which is stay good for a really long time and be opportunistic when a trade opportunity comes up to be great. Either of those directions require you to right now be in kind of overall value increasing mode. So I look at something like Goran Dragic's $19.4 million expiring contract. And I have come around from, at the time I would have been like, yeah, if you can eat money, or find a like contract coming back and pick up like a second for it, that's cool. Then the Lowry trade is kind of Lowry for Precious in a second. I have come the other way, where I would still be open to that. Like if someone is trying to unload longer term money and they're willing to pay you to do so, that is a way to increase your asset base. So let's say we'll use the Dallas example just because that was the presumed one. I'm not saying this is out there. I'm just saying, let's say Dallas is like, look, we're out on Dwight Powell. We don't want Dwight Powell's money on the books next year. We want Dragic, but we also want you to take Dwight Powell. And in order to do so, we will give you prospect X or draft pick X. I think that's one way the Raptors can use this position to increase their asset base. But the other way, which wasn't talked about a lot at the start of the year, because it's not traditionally a move we associate with a building team, is what if you attach an asset to Dragic's contract to get something meaningful back, where we're saying now, oh, let's look for a team that's in a similar position to the Raptors, and they are willing to, unload a guy in order to, a position dissimilar to the Raptors, and they're willing to offload a good player for financial flexibility or for a pick or something like that. And suddenly, even with the tax in mind, you could take back $19 million in salary, and really the asset cost of Dragic is nothing come February 10th, right? So you're talking, he is a salary matching tool only from the Raptors perspective. If you can get a capable rotation player for a first round pick, if Atlanta is, because they've got a bit of a roster crunch and cap crunch, if they're no longer seeing Bogdan Bogdanovic as a long-term piece there, for example, if the Sacramento Kings do more aggressively pursue a teardown and a Harrison Barnes or a Buddy Hield shakes loose, there are some other names you could dream on, right? Like there are a lot of guys in that $15 to $20 million salary tier, and you can get there even further if you're willing to put, hey, a Malachi Flynn in a deal, or even a Chris Boucher, who fits what the Raptors are doing, and his bird rights still have value, but he's an expiring contract and he's 29 years old and he'd fit on a lot of benches around the league. So all of that is to say, I think the Raptors could go either direction. I think I would be not disappointed, but underwhelmed if Dragic is just bought out post deadline at this point. I just think that salary ballast is really interesting for adding a long-term asset by using, hey, we're not going to be a cap team. We'll take on a salary for next year and pick up an asset for it. Or the opposite direction. Hey, we've got this salary for salary matching. It's the rare window where an expiring contract has value. We'll give you something to give us a player for it, and you get the financial benefit from it. So that's kind of where I'm at. And those are two they're two different approaches, but I don't think that they signal different directions. I think either way, you're just in the mode right now where you're trying to improve your asset base. And Dragic's contract, as much as the situation has been annoying for people, that's their best path to doing that, because the salary rules are real and you have to match salaries. And the type of players who move at this time and aren't on rookie deals or aren't max guys, Dragic's salary tier is exactly what you need for a move like that. So I'm optimistic that something shakes out between now and February 10th. I just think there are too many ways you can work it out, too many structures, too many directional options, and teams around the league willing to go in either way. That I mean, Dragic isn't going to be on this team at any point this season anyway, but I'd be a little disappointed at this point if the resolution is just a buyout post deadline.
Okay, so that puts us in a position where you and I'm just going to ask you, how comfortable are you doing the spiel on repeater tax, the $18,000 below tax line, and the implication of all of that, just for the listener?
Sure, I could do that because of the implication.
Hell yeah.
So the Raptors are, this is based on my cap numbers. These aren't, like, they don't make it publicly available, and I have to make some assumptions here. If Gary Trent were to hit all of his unlikely bonuses, the Raptors would be about 18,000 below the tax line right now. It's why Sam Decker isn't on the roster. It's why DJ Wilson didn't get re-upped after the hardship exemption expired. Staying under the tax is a real thing. And I know that the response from some people is, well, it's MLSE, just pay the tax, just pay the tax. That's fine sometimes. They pay deep into the tax in their championship season, for example. There is a reality to how they're operating right now, though, and a couple of them. The first is that this is the third season in a row for them of pandemic limited revenues. So you have the stoppage of the season and then the bubble where league-wide revenues were down. You have last year where no fans in the arena for chunks of it. The Raptors are playing in Tampa. And then this year, the Raptors are one of the team that's been limited the most in terms of attendance and gate revenues and stuff like that. So that's real. That's something MLSE is looking at. Another thing that's real is that front offices, for the most part, don't run on this is your 1 year budget, and then this is your 1 year budget, and then this is your 1 year budget. There's an understanding of a sort of rolling multi-year budget where if you spend into the tax this year, that's hypothetically taking money from next year's budget. So if you want to be a tax team next year or the year after, when you're closer to a contention window, you probably don't want to use that money now. There's also a repeater tax. The Raptors don't have a ton to worry about there because you have to be in it for 3 out of 4 years before it kicks in. But one last factor here, because I know people don't really care about this stuff that much. Waiving Sam Decker when they did only got them out of 1.3 million of his contract. Based on league-wide estimates of what the teams who are in the luxury tax are going to pay this year, that is about a real swing of $18 million for the Raptors, because getting below the tax line then also allows them to receive those tax payments, which get split up among the non-tax teams. So we're talking about like a $15-18 million swing there just from the Decker thing. This is why if you're doing the trade machine, it's not enough that the trade be approved by ESPN or Trade NBA or whatever your favorite spot is. I would say your most realistic approach is the trade should probably be salary neutral, or have the Raptors taking back a little less money this year for a little extra breathing room, because they're just not going to go into it doesn't make sense for them to go into the tax in a year where they're going to be maybe a play-in team and revenues are low, and they might want to save that, ask of the MLSE board for a year where a championship is more realistic and a trade deadline move is not adding to the long-term asset base, it's adding to championship contention. So those are all the reasons you want to stay below the tax. Those are the reasons that instead of using the trade machine approval to see if a trade works for Dragic, I've been going in my head like, okay, salaries have to match or the Raptors have to take back a little less.
for all your hypothetical trades that you love to dabble in. He sends me, like, I hope the listener understands, Blake is sending me 7 or 8 a day. Harebrained schemes.
There's
Also
a 30 team, 510 player trade.
Yes. Just a quick note for the listener as well. Blake sent me. So Devin Booker, Seth Curry, and Kevin Durant are the only players with higher long mid volume and higher long mid field goal percentage this year. So that is the company that Gary Trent Jr. is keeping as a mid-range shooter, which is pretty wild. And the last thing I want to talk about, Blake, before we let you get out of here, is you talked about, okay, are we looking to attach an asset? Are we looking to build the asset base like the Kawhi Leonard version of the Raptors was the fruits of a bunch of really solid draft picks, solid trades like Terrence Ross for Serge Ibaka, put them in a really good spot, all that kind of stuff. And now this is a team that needs something or needs to make decisions, whatever it is. Contextually, what would you most like them to go after? Is it a guard? Is it a big? What is your ideal situation there?
The honest answer is whatever is available, right? Like I don't want to get too jammed up in that, because if you get too narrowly focused on one thing, and to the extent that you're, unwilling to look at other things, I don't think that's a good way to approach things. So
Dating.
yeah. So I think with this current version of this team and what's out there on the market, like what I would assume is out there on the market anyway, I think I'd probably lean backcourt help. Again, a center is probably a bigger issue long term. If you believe Siakam and Barnes can carry a playmaking load and you have VanVleet and Trent, a center is probably the bigger long term issue. I don't really see who that's going to be this year. Like, you could maybe make a play for Nurkic, but that's you're gonna have to pay Nurkic after as well. You could make a play for our guy Rashawn Holmes. I kind of think if they wanted Rashawn Holmes at that price, they could have just got him this offseason though. And now they have to add an asset to it. I'd love to say Daniel Gafford now that he's not playing much in Washington, but he's not trade eligible in time. So that would be more of an offseason play there. I think there are just probably more paths to finding a backup caliber point guard or shooting guard. And maybe not even like backup caliber. Like I mentioned Bogdanovich and Hield as, potential guys. And I'm just throwing names out there based on guys in that salary tier. But, that type of guy, even like, this is unsexy, but like even a Doug McDermott could be available. And that's a guy who helps with your, he's kind of super Svi. So Svi who's playable, if you prefer. So I'm trying to think. I thought there was another name that I really liked in that tier, and now I'm just drawing a blank on it.
Well, Doug is a great suggestion for what it's worth. Like the way that the Spurs are able to use him, he is an offense unto himself. And as you said, it's like, it's not sexy, but he shoots 40% from downtown, and it's on like these super dynamic screens and handoffs and stuff. And the Raptors really knew how to use Norman Powell.
Eric Gordon was the other one in mind, which is maybe one where, like, I don't know what Houston's appetite is just to get out of the rest of that deal. Like, you might not have to attach a ton of asset to it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been wondering is, like, what are they looking for? Are they dumping, or are they trying to get stuff back? And like, how important is that to them? Because obviously Eric Gordon provides a lot of what the Raptors currently don't have, especially like as a guy who Pascal and Fred get doubled all the time. Eric Gordon is a guy who really can rumble to the rim and attempt to finish there. So that would be a very interesting aspect of the offense if he came in town. Like he still gets to the rim almost like 30% of his possessions this late in his career. And he's, per Basketball Reference, shooting 68% from 3 feet and in. So that is an aspect of offense that the Raptors, it would be completely unique to him as far as the dynamism.
For sure. And again, are the Rockets looking for assets, or did they just want out of next year's salary? And then I believe the year after that is unguaranteed. I don't know. This is something that, maybe right now they're saying they want assets, and then come February 10th, if they're not getting offered assets, maybe that changes. Maybe Eric Gordon wants out quietly, and that's an important factor that keeps them from holding him for an offseason trade. I don't know. That's stuff that we probably won't know until closer to February 10th. But I throw names out there to show that I think offensive-oriented off guards or wings are probably going to be easier to acquire than centers who fit the Raptors' defensive ideology.
Before we let you go, Jakob Poeltl. It's just because the fan base has been enamored and like people have been talking. Just your thoughts.
Love Yak. Think he'd be a good fit. Don't know that it helps the team's free throw troubles, but he's become an elite offensive rebounder, a very good shot blocker, a really solid defender. You see him averaging almost a double-double this year and shooting for the 5th year in a row above 60% from the floor. I think it would be cool. I don't think that's at the top of my shopping list just because they already have some spacing issues. And again, the free throw woes. But Jakob Poeltl at the $8.8 million he makes is one of the better bargains in the league. And he's only got 1 year left on the deal after that. So if the Raptors ultimately decided, look, there's nothing else out there that we liked, we just want a center, we want another guy that we like and can rely on and believe in. Sure. Like you're not in bad shape with Jakob Poeltl at $9 million, Kem Birch at $6 million, and Precious Achiuwa at like $2 million for a center rotation next year. Yeah, he's 4 inches taller than everyone else on the team.
Yep. A new dynamic, tall players in the NBA. What a strange team that they're jumbo in the middle. No, and they're very small at the point guard position. They're tiny. Well, actually, they're tiny at point guard. They're tiny at center, but they're just huge in the middle. What a strange team. Any parting shots, Blake?
Nope. Hey, actually, you know what? So every year I've done the all your trade ideas are bad column. I'm not doing that in its same iteration this year, just because, it's a very labor intensive thing. And I'm at Sportsnet now doing the radio gig. But I think what I'm going to do is I got Grange and Will Liu to send me some of their fake trades, and I'm going to tell them why those are bad. If you're listening to this, shoot me your fake trades on Twitter. Like, when is this going up? Monday?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll put the cutoff at like Monday night or Tuesday morning or something. Send me some. Can't promise they're all going to be included like usual, but a couple never hurt. So throw them my way.
You are a mad lad to take on requests. This is new for you, I guess, because there's no more athletic subscriber base.
Yeah, this is I got nothing.
A novel enterprise. Okay. If Esfandiar Berhani is listening, send the trade request, please. Blake, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been a blast.
Thanks for having me. And if S does send in someone's gonna have to send him me because he's long since muted. So
okay. For anybody wondering, if you weren't aware of who Blake was prior to this, thank you for valuing my voice over his. But if you liked what you heard, you can find him on the morning show, 6 to 10, Monday to Friday on Sportsnet. And for all your sports needs, not just basketball, but that too. Blake, thanks for coming on, man. Listener, thanks for listening, whether you got into this in the morning or at night. Have a blessed day and goodbye.